how long do you have to hold Bitcoin in order to be virtually guaranteed that you will be up on your investment? The official answer is 3 to 4 years, but I would be shocked personally if everyone who bought Bitcoin this year is not up on their investment in the next 3 to 6 months, or even 3 to 6 weeks. But the data is absolutely fascinating. So I went and ran this data partially because Bitcoin started on a nice little run up to $66,000 or even higher over last week, and then October started and Iran launched a bunch of missiles at Israel, and everyone freaked out and started selling everything. And as a result, Bitcoin has pulled back to about $61,000. So if you're like me, you're thinking, come on, Bitcoin. We keep being tempted with these runs that it's like, oh, okay, here it is. Here is the big, epic run we've all been waiting for. And then it's like, oh no, somebody's got to launch missiles at somebody and we just got to wait a little while longer. It's the story of all investing. So I got interested and I was just curious, how long do you have to hold Bitcoin in order to be virtually guaranteed that you are up on your investment? And so the question is, well, over what time period and how do you calculate that? So there's something in investing called a simple moving average, an SMA. And a simple moving average is like, the average price of anything, a stock, a bond, a commodity, a precious metal over a period of time. So the 1 week simple moving average just says, hey, what was the average in the last 7 days and how did that compare to the 7 days before that, et cetera, et cetera. And you can calculate that on every day. And it's the moving average means that I can calculate the 7-day simple moving average today. And then tomorrow I can calculate it again by adding the price tomorrow and subtracting the price that is now 8 days in the past instead of 7 days in the past. So you can do that over any time period. What that tells you is essentially if you were to only check the price of Bitcoin every so often, every day, every week, every month, every year, what is the probability that Bitcoin would be setting a new all-time record price that exact day that you checked the price? And obviously, when the time periods get larger time periods, like the longer the time period, the higher probability it will be an all-time high. Now, interestingly enough, I was playing around with the data as it relates to the Magnificent Seven stocks, which are the 7 best performing stocks on the S&P 500, which have essentially been carrying the S&P 500 for years now. The other 493 stocks essentially are a wash. The profits and losses sort of cancel each other out, which means almost all the gains in the S&P 500 have been driven by 7 companies, whereas the other 493 companies are mostly just a wash. So I started running the numbers, and interestingly, on a 1-day simple moving average, which you don't really do a simple moving average for 1 day because every day is basically its own day. But it was interesting because I was looking at Amazon, Microsoft, and a couple others, and Apple, and it was all about 4 to 5% of the time that that any of these high performing assets is setting an all-time record price in any given day. What that means is it feels like you are down on your investment 95% to 96% of the time. That's why investing is so hard. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It has to do with the fact that every asset is down from its all-time high, typically at least 95% of the time. So even if you hold the best performing assets like NVIDIA, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, all of those assets generally are down from their all-time high about more than 95% of the time, which means if you checked the price and you only get that euphoric feeling of being, an amazing investment when it's setting an all-time price higher than what you've ever seen before, if that is sort of your measure of successful investing, then even the best performing assets in the universe are going to leave you feeling disappointed 95% of the time. Because the nature of all of these investments is they go up, they spike at, to some relatively high price, then they drop back, they hang back sometimes weeks, months, or years, then they do a new run to a new all-time high price. And in aggregate, over time, they end up being incredible investments. But that's because you have to have the patience to live through the long time periods when they are just doing what they're doing, like Bitcoin over the last 6 months. So Bitcoin is the best performing asset in the world since its, genesis back 16 years ago. But even so, there are long periods of months and in the past, sometimes even years, or at least a year, where the price was not going the right way, and it was painful to hold on to the asset, or to have to buy more when it's down, which is, of course, it takes conviction in any asset to buy more when it's down. So I ran the numbers as it relates to Bitcoin, and let me get the piece of paper here that I printed out. So I posted this chart on my Facebook page, and I thought it was fascinating, so I wanted to share it with you. So the 1-day simple moving average, which is the sort of rolling average on a daily basis, the probability that Bitcoin hits an all-time high at any random day in the last 10 years is 4%. So if you just decided you're going to randomly check the price of Bitcoin, every time you check the price of Bitcoin, the probability that it's at an all-time high on that day is 4%. Now, obviously, if it's close to an all-time high, that probability is higher. And if it's a long way away from an all-time high, the probability is lower. But on average, it's 4%. Which again is in line with the Magnificent Seven stocks and other super high performing assets. But if you checked the price only every week, and you looked at the 1 week moving average rather than just the daily, the probability that Bitcoin is up in any random week you might check is 8%. So it jumps from 4% to 8%. But if you said, hey, I am not going to be obsessing about this thing, I'm not going to check the price 40 times a day like Joel does, I'll just check the price once a month, your probability of getting an all-time high price when you check it is 15%, from 4% to 8% to 15%. So what if you only checked every couple months? That probability jumps to 19%, every 3 months jumps to 22%, every 6 months jumps to 29%. I know that's a lot of numbers, but here's where it really gets interesting. If you have patience, like you should with any investment, as you get run into numbers that are 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, the number gets very close and ultimately lands at 100%. So for example, if you only checked the price of Bitcoin once a year, there'd be a 35% chance that it would be at an all-time high. If you check every 2 years, there'd be a 62% chance. And if you only checked every 3 years, there'd be a 97% chance that Bitcoin would be at an all-time high. So the question is, how long do you have to hold Bitcoin in order to be virtually guaranteed? It's almost, the answer would be 3 years, because there's only a couple very specific time frames where you could check the price 3 years apart and it would be lower than the price 3 years prior. But more than 97% of the time, the price is higher. And the very few situations where the price would be lower than 3 years prior, you can literally just wait a few days and then the price will be higher. So it's these very, very niche time ranges of 3 years, where the exact 3 years ago was especially high compared to exactly 3 years later when it had a temporary dip. So again, even on a 3-year basis, if you check the price every 3 years of Bitcoin and it was down, then literally you can wait a couple days and it'll be back up to the highest it's ever been when you checked it. Now, the real interesting thing is you hear people talk about the 4-year halving cycle of Bitcoin and all of that. And the reason is that over 4 years, Bitcoin has never been down over a 4-year period of time ever in its history. So which creates another interesting thing, which is every single day from the very first day of Bitcoin, or I should say from the very first time that there even was 4 years of history of Bitcoin, which has been more than a decade now. So over the last 10 years, 10.2 years to be exact, the day Bitcoin turned four years old, at least of price data, which is more than a decade ago, if you had averaged the price of Bitcoin every single day over the last more than 10 years, you would find that Bitcoin, the average price over the previous 4 years, was a record every single day. There has never been a day in the history of Bitcoin where the average price over the last 4 years was not a record compared to every other time period over the previous 4 years. So once again, if you have a long-term investment horizon, you can not worry about it. If you buy Bitcoin at any point, at the high prices, the low prices, literally any point, you can be almost guaranteed that as long as you hold it for at least 3 years, well, you're at 97% probability of being up, and 4 years, that jumps to a complete and total 100%. So I am not aware of any other asset that has that level of consistency where if you hold it for long enough, it's automatically up. So for example, gold peaked in 2011 and did not come back to its all-time high until 2020. So that's 9 years. So in the case of gold, there was a time period where you could buy some badly timed gold in 2011, and you had to wait 9 years to be up on your investment. 9 years. So again, Bitcoin, that the longest that's ever been is 4 years. And but I was curious. So over the next few days, I'm going to try to run those numbers when I have time here and there on the Magnificent 7 stocks, which are the 7 highest performing stocks on the S&P 500. I'm going to run those same numbers and see what those numbers are. But the short answer for Bitcoin is, as long as you're willing to hold Bitcoin for at least 3 or 4 years, which generally any asset you're buying, you should be willing to hold for at least 3 or 4 years. Obviously, the probability you'll be up on lower time periods, like 2 years, is still good. That's 62%. And right now, based on where we are in the timing of the cycle, I think everybody in the Bitcoin world would say, the probability you're up in the next 3 months from today's price is, significantly above 50%. And the probability over the next year is, probably above 90%. So we are in an especially good time period based on the cycle of the price of Bitcoin to be buying Bitcoin. It is just a fantastic time to buy Bitcoin right now. Just because, again, we went through the sort of brutal bear market of 2022, and that's behind us. And there's likely not another brutal bear market until 2026, at least if the sort of 4-year cycle keeps playing out, which tends to be the case. And if you want to understand why that is, read Vijay Boyapati's book, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. That again is The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. There's an online article on Medium or Substack or something by the same name. Again, it's Vijay Boyapati, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, but the book is a lot better than the blog post. Even though the blog post is much shorter, it's like a 40-minute read. The book, which will take you multiple hours, is much better. But if you want to understand the price cycles of Bitcoin, why it goes up and down, the one and only book you should read to understand the price cycles of Bitcoin is The Bullish Case for Bitcoin by Vijay Boyapati. But anyway, those numbers are fascinating. As long as you got a long enough time horizon, you're good. So if you check the price of Bitcoin and it stresses you out, zoom out. If you zoom out from a day to a week, your chances of finding a new all-time high double. If you zoom out from a week to a month, they double again. And if you zoom out again from a month to, say, 3 months, your probability, jumps way up again. And the more you zoom out, the higher probability is that you will be up on your investment. And especially when you zoom into the 2-year, 3-year, 4-year timeframes, your probability of being up jumps at two years to 62%, 3 years to 97%, and 4 years to 100%. So anyway, hope it helps, especially in a time like this where the price of Bitcoin is frustrating to all of us, because we're like, come on, Bitcoin, how long are we going to stay stuck between 55,000 and 70,000? And that's part of what makes the price get stuck, is people get tired of it and they sell the asset. And the people that believe in the core value proposition of the asset, which are people like me, just have to patiently wait for the next all-time high price, which will be here at any moment. We just don't know. We don't know what day that is, what week that is, what month that is. But in the meantime, if you're frustrated by the price of Bitcoin, just zoom out a little bit. And every little bit you zoom out, the probability of you getting an all-time high on your investment, NASDAQ, Dow Jones Industrial Average, stuff like that. And I'm going to try to graph them all on the same piece of paper if I can. And hopefully that'll just create sort of a fascinating look into how long does it take to get, different assets, to get an all-time high in different assets. So hope you enjoyed this video. Happy to answer any questions. And I will link to the chart I posted that has all these numbers in it in the first comment on this post. Have a great day, everyone. And if you got any questions about Bitcoin, let me know. Otherwise, Bitcoin's doing great. It is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The fundamentals, the value proposition, the ability to transfer value anywhere in the world, permissionless, 24/7, anywhere in the world, super securely.